or I mean.
I hope we go live.
Okay, and I think we should be solid, so go ahead.
Okay, so good evening to everyone and welcome to the webinar entitled Citizens' Assemblies to Tackle the Climate Crisis, Learning from Past Experiences. I am Yasmin from XR Finland Citizens Assembly Working Group, and I have here in the organizing team with me Pauli, Tuulia, and Anna. We are here to learn about international and national processes of deliberative democracy to tackle the climate crisis. We will be hearing 3 expert talks from France, the UK, and Finland. XR Finland's third demand is to have a citizens' assembly or multiple citizens' assemblies on climate and ecological justice. We consider that citizens' assemblies and processes of deliberative democracy are often quite hidden in the public political discussion. And one of the aims of this webinar is to generate awareness of these processes that give power to people to be part of decision-making affecting their lives. We will be hearing about the positive experiences regarding citizens' assemblies and deliberative democracy, but also about their challenges. Thank you to our guest speakers for being here, and we are looking forward to having an enlightening experience. Please feel free to post your questions to us via the YouTube channel. We will monitor the text box and collate the questions to open the discussion at the end. I will now hand over to Anna to introduce the panelists. Over to you, Anna.
Yeah, so welcome and good evening to everyone also from my side. I am looking forward very much to learn about how deliberative democracy has been or could be used in France, the UK and Finland, and I hope you are excited too. So first, Bénédicte Apouey and Jean-François Laslier are going to talk about the French Citizens Convention for Climate, which took place in 2019 and 2020. And both Bénédicte and François are working at the Paris School of Economics. Then second, Nessy Haines-Matos, co-director of the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill Alliance, will give a presentation on the UK Climate Assembly and the next step in the right direction. And then finally, we also have Lari Karreinen, chairman of the Finnish Institute of Deliberative Democracy with us. And in his talk, he is going to address the question if it is time in Finland for real deliberative democracy. Okay, so please, Bénédicte and François, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So I am Jean-François Laslier from Paris, and Bénédicte will show the slides that we have prepared. Okay, so our aim here is to give you some information about this convention, how it happened, what was the outcome, and if it worked well or not. Basically, it worked very well, but we'll see in more details. So this convention, you can see it. It was a unique and at first time in France that such an event took place. And a good way to start the presentation is just to show you the presentation of the convention on its own official website. So for the first time, a panel representative of the diversity of French citizens will be directly involved in the preparation of the law. The Citizen Convention on Climate is an unprecedented democratic experiment in France. It aims to give citizens a voice to accelerate the fight against climate change. Its mandate is to define a series of measures that will allow to achieve a reduction of at least 40% in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, compared to its level in 1990, in a spirit of social justice. So every word is important. It was decided by the President of the Republic, and it brings together 150 people drawn by lot. It represents the diversity of French society. These citizens learned about, debated, and prepared draft laws on all issues relating to ways to combat climate change. The plenary sessions will be streamed on the site, and it was done. The President of the Republic has committed to submitting these legislative and regulatory proposals without a filter, either to a referendum, to a vote in Parliament, or to direct governmental implementation. So that's most of it is in here, except how it happened and what happened during the convention, of course. So, Bénédicte, tu peux mettre la diapo suivante. So the origin of this convention are multiple. So first, there is the intellectual origins. The intellectual origin is the deliberative democracy movement, and some of the people here are involved in this movement. It was both academic and civil movement, and the basic fact that was little by little discovered, say, or confirmed, is the fact that a group of randomly selected persons is able to get information and to give good answers to even complex, controversial, difficult questions. Of course, many people do not believe that, but we now have many experience of this fact, and it is true. The deliberative democracy movement is a worldwide movement carried both by academics and society. So this is a long-run thing, long-term thing. Now there is also the green movement that has been active in promoting the idea of that this convention should take place. I will not go into the detail, but you can imagine. And there are more specific circumstances, political occasions. The first is the Yellow Vest movement that you certainly have heard of, a non-structured protest that appeared in France in 2018. It started by protest against the rise of the carbon tax, linked to car use and the roundabout symbolism. You probably have heard about this, so I will not go into details in the interest of time. This unstructured protest movement throughout France has many claims, many contradictory claims also. And in part, one of them was of particular interest for us. It was the claim that there should be referendum d'initiative citoyenne, citizens' initiative referendum. So there was a demand, a societal demand of more direct intervention of the public into the collective decisions. So this event was very important in France, and the President of the Republic was looking for an answer to this movement, and he took up the idea that of this Convention Citoyenne, citizen convention. So that's the immediate origins of the convention. Now the thing was implemented, and it was a big thing. Okay, it was a huge event. It needed a complex architecture. There are many issues. It took a long time, and on and all, it started effectively in October 2019, and it lasted for almost 1 year, in fact, because of the circumstances. It cost more than 5 million euros. And Bénédicte will explain briefly the material or organization of this event that needs to be understood in order to realize what this kind of events can be. So maybe Bénédicte, you can go on.
Yes, sorry, I will go on now. So, okay, so first, this convention for climate was organized by CESE. So CESE is a very specific assembly in France. It's the third assembly, which is a constitutional consultative assembly. And basically all the sessions of the, let's say, before the sanitary crisis, before the COVID crisis, the sessions of the convention took place at Palais d'Iéna in Paris, which houses CESE. Okay. Okay. So then, regarding the architecture of this convention, first there was a governance committee, so COGUV, which was made of 17 people. And what is important is that in these 17 people, there were 15 members plus 2 citizens. And these citizens were randomly chosen and they regularly changed. So these citizens changed over time. And in this governance committee, there were 2 co-chairs, 1 rapporteur, and 12 experts. So experts on climate change, experts on participative democracy, experts in the economic and social field, etc. Then there were 3 guarantors, including Cyril Dion, which is a famous filmmaker in France. These guarantors were involved in things related to the independence of the convention and to working conditions, so to ensure that the working conditions were good. Then the citizens met with a large number of experts. So the role of these experts were really to share the technical knowledge, to provide feedbacks on the citizen proposal. Some of these experts were selected by the governance committee, but in addition, citizens were invited to suggest names of experts from the beginning of the convention. Then in addition to these experts, there were another type of experts, which was basically experts from the support group. So these experts remained and stayed in the convention throughout the process. So the citizens could ask them questions. They helped them in the long run. Then there were a number of fact checkers to answer clarification questions. The law committee, which was involved in the transcription of the measure in legal jargon. And an original feature of the French Convention for Climate is this co-construction of the measures between these different types of experts and the citizens. Then there were a number of facilitators and moderators and a number of researchers, observers. So that is us, in fact. We were part of this large group of researchers and observers. So regarding these citizens, what is important is that they were randomly selected and they were supposed to be representative of the French population. So the sampling process is what we call quota sampling, using 6 criteria, which were gender, age, starting age 16, education, the social professional category, the type of territory, the geographic region. So basically, it means that the final sample is representative of the French population according to these 6 criteria. Then the original sample included members and substitutes in case some members stopped the process during the convention. And additional substitutes were found at 2 points in time during the process. So since the participation of these citizens to the convention is on a voluntary basis, it could be the case that citizens are not perfectly representative of the French population for any dimension. So for sure, they are going to be representative along the 6 criteria, but they are not necessarily representative of the French population for any dimension in theory. So as researchers, one of the tasks we decided to do was to explore the representativity of these citizens by comparing the answers to a number of questionnaires we asked them to fill during the convention with responses from the French population in large national surveys or in an external survey we designed. So basically, we were comparing two things. On the one hand, the answers of the citizens to the questionnaire we administered during the convention with, on the other hand, the answers of the French population to the exact same question, but asked in national surveys or in an external survey we designed. And basically, our main conclusion is that the convention, the citizens from the convention are representative of the general population with some pretty small differences. So for instance, we find that they have the same level of life satisfaction. We find that they have the same values in the sense that when they are asked about the qualities that should be encouraged in children, the three main qualities are the same for the citizens and in the French population. These qualities are first, tolerance and respect for others, second, a sense of responsibility, and third, determination and perseverance. Then we find slight differences in the sense that among the citizens of the convention, there's an emphasis on imagination, independence, personal expression. So let's say these qualities are more often chosen by the citizen compared to the general population. And in contrast, among the citizens of the convention, obedience and attendance at work are less important qualities than in the general population. Then we also find that both among the citizens and in the general population, there is a large support for a certain number of policies against climate change, but among the citizens of the convention, this support is even greater. So it's very large already in the population, but among citizens, there's even a larger emphasis on the importance of these policies. So regarding the differences, we find that it looks like the members of the convention are probably a bit more aware, a bit more informed about climate change. For instance, they are more likely to know that climate change is due to human activity. Then the citizens of the convention have more confidence in other people in general. They have more confidence in the ability of randomly selected citizens to productively deliberate on complex policy issues. And they have a sense of belonging, which is slightly different than the general population, in the sense that they less often have the feeling that they belong to their neighborhood or village or city, but they more often have the feeling that they belong to the world. And in these cases, the differences are significant. So the work during this convention was organized in plenary sessions, which were often broadcast and which are now available on the website of the convention. But the citizens also work in small groups, thematic groups, and they were assigned in these 5 groups by lot. So there was one group on transport, another one on food, a third one on consumption, a fourth one on work and production, and the last one on housing. And what we observed in these small groups was that citizens tended to self-organize and to moderate and counterbalance each other. So the work went very well, in fact. These citizens also worked from home. So we found that they studied the issue by themselves, by reading books, for instance. They attended a number of webinars. So some of these webinars were organized by the convention, but they also organized webinars by themselves. And then they also interacted through a dedicated online platform, which was called J'en Parle, but they also interacted one with the other using WhatsApp, for instance, or other formats. During the convention, the citizens were invited to interact with the outside world. So they organized public meetings, for instance. They met with professionals and with politicians, And they were also encouraged to speak to journalists. In session 7, which was in June 2020, the citizens voted on the measures. So basically, they voted not on each measure separately, but on blocks of measures. So there were 44 blocks that contain 150 measures. So 43 blocks of measures were approved with a very high approval rate. One that included a lowering of the speed limits on motorways was also approved, but with a lower approval rate. And finally, one block was rejected. And this this proposal was about reducing the working time from 35 to 28 hours a week. So in total, 149 measures were approved. So in fact, there is a huge variety of measures. So here on my slide, I gave a small list of measures. What is important is that some measures, like advertisement bans, won't have a large effect on GHG emissions, but they represent a change of society. And this is the reason why the citizens decided to include this type of measures. If we read the final report, we really see that the proposals are very numerous. They cover a very large scope, and they are delivered with a variable degree of precision. So some of these measures go into great details down to the logistic writing, and other are more general. So now Jean-François is going to finish. Jean-François, you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, and I can talk. Yes, so they handed finally this report that is a huge thing, 506 pages. They were very proud of that. But then the convention, became really a political object. So we have 2 slides to conclude, to explain you what happened at that level. So Emmanuel Macron declared from the beginning, and he reiterates his promises, that he would pass the measures to the appropriate level, being either government direct implementation or a law proposal to the parliament, or even a referendum for those proposals that would require changing constitutional items, for instance. So that's what he declared, and to say the least, the participants to the convention were very cautious. In fact, they didn't trust Emmanuel Macron, but he reiterated the idea. So finally, they more or less trusted it. At the end of the convention, they came up with their 149 proposals, and he said, "Okay, there are three of them that I will not implement for various reasons." And then they entered in a strange phase where the work was in principle finished, okay, but they were wondering what will happen now. Okay, within France, the political parties began to take stands with respect to these proposals and to the convention itself. The critique from the left was essentially that the president of the Republic and his governments will be cherry-picking the proposals they want and letting the others aside. And indeed, the members of the citizen members of the convention were unhappy about these political decisions, claiming that in fact there were filters and that their work might be in danger of being useless. Tu peux passer la diapo suivante. So this is a very delicate problem that is not over, meaning that this struggle between different political parties and the convention and the government is not over yet. We are now in France in the process of implementing at various levels or not these proposals. And we can see that little by little, the political parties that was very unsure of what was going to happen, little by little, take a strategic position with respect to the convention. So on the right side of the political spectrum, the right does not trust the citizen output and claims that the process cannot be trusted because it was initiated by and it is in the hand of left-wing activists. And it's partly true that at the start, the Green movement were efficient enough to start this convention. And at the beginning of the process, the left-wing politicians were also rather cautious because they claimed that the process could not be trusted because it was initiated by Emmanuel Macron. So you can see that, in fact, both at some point in time, both left and right were lacking trust into the citizens' ability to handle this issue. After the convention, we can see that the positions have stabilized, and the left, in particular, of course, the Green, now trust the result of this convention and use it as an argument, saying that the government doesn't fulfill its promises. Now, the citizens during the convention and after the convention were very aware of this issue, and they had to handle it with care. They had to take into account these political questions, both inside and among them, because they are diverse, okay, and also with respect to what will be released in the general public and what will be the image of their group, of the convention, okay. So they were very acute and I believe quite clever in managing these questions, both internally and externally. In particular, the surprise is that they took their responsibility, and they took in even more than their responsibility, because their mandate was clearly to make proposals and then to pass on these proposals. And their mandate had to end at that point. But they, after some discussion among them, they finally decided to demand to follow up after the end of the mandate, in the sense that they asked to Macron to have the possibility to keep on discussing with the civil servants of the government that were trying to write down laws to be eventually enacted. They asked to have interviews at the parliament. They asked to act after the end of their mandate, and this demand was accepted. They created an association, Les 150, 150, who is discussing with the government, who is discussing with the parliament, who is discussing with local politicians. They more or less take public positions, although it's a bit difficult to act officially, but they are in this process. And this is, I believe, very original, and it explains also why this story is not complete yet. Okay, so I think we will stop here.
Thank you so much, Bénédicte and Jean-François, for your very interesting presentation. It was really great to hear how this Citizens' Assembly on the climate was implemented and organized, and yeah, very interesting also to hear how it now continues and how the members, these 150 people, are still acting and making sure that their decisions are implemented. I think that's really impressive as well. But I would say before we take questions, we still have the other two presentations. So it is now Nessy's turn.
Thank you very much. And thank you to you both for your wonderful presentation. I learned so much. And also thank you to everyone for speaking in English. It's really with much gratitude, but I would be really struggling if I had to speak Finnish or French. So thank you very much. Okay, I'll start with, I have to share, may help first of all. I think I'm entire screen allow. Sorry about that. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Right. Okay. So it's really interesting that the origins of the UK Climate Assembly were really, really different. A different story from the French story. We can just briefly, in 2008, the UK passed the Climate Change Act, which enshrined in law that the UK must reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 80% compared to the 1990s baseline by 2050. So that was really groundbreaking, because we were one of the first countries to have carbon budgets enshrined in law, where we would have a cap for every 5 years. In 2019, when the climate and ecological emergency was becoming much more sort of tangible for everyone, there were an awful lot of protests. The Extinction Rebellion particularly, there was a very big protest in London. And in 2019, the UK government passed a law amending the Climate Change Act that the UK would have to be net zero by 2050, not just 80%, but net zero. So this led on to the UK Climate Assembly. However, the difference is it wasn't commissioned by government, and it wasn't commissioned with the idea to write the recommendations directly into law. The Climate Assembly was commissioned by 6 select committees of the House of Commons and Parliament, and so the commissioning was cross-party. However, as I said before, the recommendations weren't going to be enshrined in law. They were going to be used to inform policies of furthering policies for the Climate Change Act in our amended net zero target. So I will move on. Some nice pictures there for you. So obviously, many of us do think of democracy as a positive way, a progressive way of governance. Deliberative democracies, we know, which citizens' assemblies are part of deliberative democracy, are one way of doing it, and have definitely become more popular, and there's greater awareness now. So just for a moment, in Finland and France, compared to the UK, we all have such different contexts, cultural backgrounds. Just think for a moment what you feel in your country, how you feel your political processes and governance could be improved, and how you think they could be enhanced. Do you need more public involvement? So this was, of course, this is what we hope deliberative democracy may bring. In the UK, we have a very old-fashioned system. It's called first past the post. We don't have representational politics to the extent that other countries do. So I think deliberative democracy in the UK has become a really interesting progressive idea, and something that people are really interested in implementing. So this was this wonderful experiment, UK-wide, began in 2019 but was run in 2020 mainly online as the French one. And as I say, related to the amended law of the Climate Change Act. So the Climate Assembly UK brought together it was about 108 people. And as my colleagues have just said previously, they've described wonderfully the sortition process, how people are randomly selected to be a representative sample of whichever population your country has. And that's age, gender. In fact, there are different criteria. For example, the professional independent body that organised the UK Climate Assembly, they had a civic lottery that looked at categories of age, gender, ethnicity, educational level, where they lived, whether it was urban or rural area, and their attitude towards climate change. So they wanted to make sure that was a broad spectrum, from not necessarily climate deniers, but people who were indifferent about the climate emergency, to those who were very, very actively involved in it. So that attitudinal spectrum was also included. And it began with a postal vote. So 30,000 letters were posted across households in the UK. And the assemblies met at weekends. So let's move on. So 6 weekends, starting with the spring 2020. There were delays because of the pandemic. So the question for the assembly members, not so dissimilar to the French question, but how should the UK meet its target of net zero gas emissions by 2050? Now, a later date, but net zero target. However, no mention about environment or ecology. So one of the sort of reflections was the question was quite limited. So all members took part to discuss, first of all, principles. So they established principles. And so the first 2 sessions were about their own experiences, values, and views, and then evidence from the Assembly's first 3 panel speakers. The panels covered an introduction to climate change and different perspectives on ethical, practical, and strategic questions. Probably very similar in a very comprehensive way to the way the French expert panel would have presented, I imagine. So you would have formal presentations and a open forum for questions, but also there were smaller groups formed. So just quickly looking at the process. So quite quickly, there was a decision-making process that began after the 2 sets of panelists speaking. And you have a little prompt question. The UK's path to net zero by 2050 should be underpinned by the principles of, and then the Assembly members would then, that was an open question, would then start to, deliberate on this. So you would have there's a little printing error. Small groups sat at the tables, and there would be priority responses, so they were categorized. So you would have facilitators that would take responses and grouped ideas together. Now, one big difference between the UK one and the French one was that the recommendations were not going to be, in the UK one, not going to be written directly into UK law, or as it were, the French constitution. I don't believe there were lawyers there or legal experts to draft legalese. So that was one of the differences. So just quickly, what recommendations arose from the Climate Assembly? So first of all, we looked at principles, underpinning principles. So not so much solutions, as in more electric cars or, something about specific measures for ecology. There were the principles that must underpin every single recommendation. So 74 votes were on informing and educating everyone. And that was across the board. So from all the public, also in education as well, of course, business, industry, very important. Then there was a sense of fairness. Now, this is very interesting because we can think of how the origins of the French Climate Assembly came from that sense of maybe economic injustices. So similarly, there was a sense of these changes need to be fairly distributed and not a burden to those who can least afford it. Then 3, leadership from government that is clear, proactive, accountable and consistent. This is really important. We have a problem here, like so many other governments as well, but particularly is that we have governments who give pledges and promises and ceremony, a lot of ceremony, great speeches, but all of this is of no good unless it is put into law and that the law can be enforced. Otherwise, it is worth nothing. So next one, protecting and restoring the natural world. Now, that was 59 votes. Now, as I said, unfortunately, the Assembly question that was posed was limited to the climate. So number 5, ensuring solutions are future-proof and sustainable. Now, this is thinking about generational justice, so thinking about future generations. A joined-up approach, yes, that certainly makes sense on all levels, local, national and global. Number 7, long-term planning and transitional. Now, again, the only problem, one of the criticisms about the 2050 target is it's so far away. And actually, it can do the opposite. It can delay action. So that's an interesting one. However, the 37 votes understood the urgency, the emergency, and the 37 votes on innovation and science. However, I think the elephant in the room, which is an expression that means something that we must never mention, that I don't know if it were talked about in the French Climate Assembly, is degrowth. I don't know how many people really seriously, there's a lot about technology and green growth via GDP, but degrowth, which is something that the rich countries seriously need to be thinking about, is living with slightly less. So Now more concrete recommendations. We had transport, a shift to electric vehicles, improvement on public transport, very important. Our public transport, sometimes is quite prohibitive in cost. It's not always so highly subsidized as other European countries. So air travel. Now this was interesting. They wanted to protect lifestyles. So still, they didn't say ban air travel, but have a look at how you could maybe limit the need to, say, take holidays abroad. Why not also enjoy your own country, perhaps? And they were looking at taxation. And of course, there's always the idea of cleaner technologies. So heating and energy use is a huge part of our emissions in the UK. Because of, particularly in the winters, we predominantly still use gas central heating in our homes. There's a big push now for air heat pumps now, for example, but there's an awful lot of infrastructure that will need to go into every home to facilitate this shift to green technology. So there we looked at eating and food and land use. That was really important. There's a huge part of our greenhouse gas emissions, because we weren't just looking at carbon, we were looking at methane, nitrous oxide, and about how how we use land and grow food has a huge impact on our emissions in the UK. So there was about supporting farmers and agriculture, but an awareness of vegetarian and vegan diets as well. We do have, since apparently we've departed the EU, is that there are incentives for farmers now to use more agroecology in farming, so things like hedgerows that will allow for more natural habitat on farmland. So again, looking at what we buy, this was very interesting. So repairing and sharing more. So not just about recycling, but about renovating and repairing. I remember definitely in the 1970s and 80s, it was so common to repair electrical appliances. It was common to repair your shoes and clothes. So it's that idea of that regenerative sort of culture, and of recycling of businesses and so forth. So this was really interesting about carbon removal methods. Most of the assembly, after hearing about the different types of methods of carbon dioxide removal, were really in favor of natural solutions, such as, looking at conserving and restoring peatland, wetland, and our forests, and of course, our oceans, our coastal areas as well. And the other thing, finally, is to say that they wanted to make sure that they could continue this work, and that their recommendations would truly make an impact into further policy that went towards the Climate Change Act in getting to net zero by 2050. So I can stop sharing now. Thank you. And yes, and I think you can hear me. Yes. So that's the end of my presentation. Yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Thanks a lot, Nessy. Really great to hear also about this example from the UK, especially like what were the principles that were decided on and the decisions, and they seem also to differ from the ones that were decided in France. So that is also interesting that these assemblies still kind of produce same results, but then also different regarding their culture. backgrounds they're embedded in, which I guess makes sense. Right. There are already a lot of questions in the YouTube channel. So if you have time, Nessy, Bénédicte, and Jean-François, you can also have a look there and already answer some. But before we have our question and answer session, I still would like to give the chance to Lari to give his presentation on the Finnish situation.
Thank you very much. And well, after these two great presentations, and I was like, whoa, what processes, you have done such a thorough and great deliberative democracy. And I know there's a lot of experience about this in France and in UK, and you really can see it in the results and how you do these. So compared to Finland, so we are coming behind. I'll share a little bit how on this. So my question is it time for real deliberative democracy in Finland? And a little bit my background in deliberative democracy. About 2013, I was facilitating in Helsinki, the capital of Finland, a citizen jury about parking policy of city of Helsinki. And it's very difficult for the participants, about a group of 15 people, to decide on about 12 different topics on how to guide the parking in a growing city. But I think two issues from that experience came up to me personally. One thing was one participant said in the end of the session that, okay, now here we had the city in a nutshell, so represented all different kind of participants in the city. I really love to be a citizen, an inhabitant of this city, if it consists of such a fine people. So really creating a community out of the citizens that really expressed very differing opinions. And the other one was that how difficult it was for the participants to really understand the complexity of the decision making. And I think that their understanding of the complexity and city planning issues was really deepened, and also appreciation towards the decision makers grew in that process. So I'm Lari Karreinen. I have been a chairperson of the Finnish Institute for Deliberative Democracy. Nowadays I'm a board member, not anymore the chairperson, and I work as a solution-focused coach and a facilitator in Osana Yhteistä Ratkaisua, which is a firm also working in public participation. And I've done the International Association of Public Participation Foundations course, and also the course for strategies for dealing with opposition and outrage in public participation. So I also have some background training on this issue and written a few publications in Finnish about complexity and deliberative democracy, and then a handbook on citizens' juries. And our institute is a non-profit, non-partisan association, and its aim is to improve representative and direct democracy by means of deliberative citizen participation and enhance transparent and discoursive decision-making in Finland. And we bring together practitioners and researchers in the field. So to come out what we have had in Finland, so we have had several deliberative decision juries and panels in local level in communes, like Kemijärvi, Vaasa, Jyväskylä, Säkylä, and Mustasaari. What I found out, I might be wrong, there might be some others, but anything related to climate issues, so there have been two. This one where I took part as a facilitator in Helsinki, Parking Policy 2013, and last year in Turku about city planning. This was a real climate assembly with over 100 participants. Typical for this is that these have been project-based with non-profits or arranged by universities with a close collaboration with the research projects. So not really any communes, seldom communes alone, but often as project-based. So it happens every now and then, but it's not something that goes on all the time. We have had some citizen juries and panels in national level, like on the Finnish democracy in 2013 and freedom of speech last year, arranged by the Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Justice, and some others also. And climate-related juries, there was a peatland use in Seinäjoki made by the Core Research Project 2017, and this year the Equity in Climate Action Citizen Jury arranged by the Ministry of Environment. A little bit more about that later on. So the case in Finland about the challenges of deliberative democracy is that it's very limited in impact. There are one-time projects. It's not a permanent tool on a local or national level. And there is therefore no larger impact on society and policy making. So this is really a problem. I was really impressed by the British and France thorough examples of how you can really make it several times and do it in a really thorough way. We do have a law concerning local governments to organize discussions and hearings as well as citizen juries. It doesn't mandate, but it says the municipalities should do this, but it's not obligatory. And we have some actors in the field, like the University of Vaasa and Åbo Academy, another university, which are active, and also the University of Tampere, for example, but and the research projects, Palo and Core, but they are those that most often are involved in arranging these citizen juries. We have, of course, our Institute of Deliberative Democracy. We don't ourselves do these citizen juries, but we support other bodies doing it. And then we have two companies, private companies, that have arranged these, Accordi and then Osana Yhteistä Ratkaisua, the latter where I work. So very small population, or very small amount of people working with this skills, arranging these citizen juries and assemblies. So what we would need in Finland, I think, is some kind of support in national or regional legislation that we really would mandatorily do these citizen juries, and also have capacity building training for civil servants on deliberative democracy and citizen juries, how you really do these, and when you should do this, and under what circumstances. And maybe also funding in a way that also citizens could initiate these processes on questions that they feel that are important. So not all the initiatives would come from the administration side. And a few words on citizen jury on the climate action and equity in climate action arranged by the Ministry of Environment this year. So the participants were recruited with a questionnaire sent to 8,000 randomly selected Finns. So basically what you told in France and UK. 33 participants, so really a small one compared to those previously heard. And it based its discussions on a list of actions made by the Ministry of Environment. They had a background material and expert hearing in the beginning of process as usual. They had 3 meetings online. So considering in France you had 7+1 weekends, and in the UK 6 weekends compared to these 3 meetings online. So really a short process, not really have time to go thoroughly through those topics, which are really complex and deep. The results, they gave their opinions on 14 actions. Here you can see some in Finnish. What I found interesting was that 30 participants voted in favor of the statement on all, 2 abstained and 1 was absent, and there were also few dissenting opinions on the actions, and there was also in these dissenting opinions that there was not enough time to really discuss through some issues. So I interpret this that because of the short process there was not enough time. Well, as a facilitator I can say that there's never enough time, or seldom is. These results will be taken into a roundtable for climate change that are consisting of the political decision makers and experts, and they discussed this actually a week ago. I don't know about the results. They are not public yet. So there was a link to decision making, but not at all as strong as in France, and more ambiguous as that was in the UK. There was also some critique on this citizen jury from the Automobile and Touring Club of Finland, who stated that it was a strange, politically motivated process. Actually, the same thing that you can see also in France. Don't we have parliament elected by the people? Why do we need a citizen jury? Questioning the need for this tool. And they said that we have a good quality research, so why do you need 50 lay persons talking about these issues? So really not grasping the essence and the meaning of these processes, and also critiquing, who are chosen and why. So this is something also that in Finland you need to, when arranging these processes, you should pay really close attention on what you do, how you create these groups of participants, and be really clear and transparent, and base your selections on clear and criteria. So all in all, I would say we would have a lot of use in complex issues, in causes where there are conflicts of interest, when there are pressure groups defending their own interests. That also applies here, and in the case where people are required to make financial sacrifices on compromises on changes in behavior. So we really have all the reasons for working more with these tools, but under the current circumstances, we are lacking the capacity and the knowledge and also understanding how and when we should use citizen juries and citizens panels as part of the policy making processes in Finland. So that's about it, briefly about the situation in Finland. And well, I can only admire my colleagues in the UK and France, as I have said already many times, and I'm very open to questions and eager to talk more on this issue. And I do really hope that in the future we will see more citizen juries and panels here also in Finland, and taking the examples of France and the UK to also in Finland.
Thanks, Lari. We also hope that a lot, that we will at one point in time, we will have a citizens assembly on the climate also in Finland here, and we, as well as you from the Deliberative Democracy Institute, are working towards that goal, and I think it has been very inspirational to hear from the other examples that it actually works to have these citizens assemblies. So we have now a bunch of questions. Maybe we could start with a question to our French participants here. There was one question in the YouTube channel, if the legitimacy of the convention, of the citizens convention, if that was measured in the public. Do you have any knowledge about that?
Yes. So in fact, in an external survey we carried out at PSC, there were at least two questions about this legitimacy. One was asking of the French people of our sample whether they believed that the convention was representative of the French population, as that was the first thing. And then there was another question, which was whether whether they knew what the convention was, because in fact the two are related, of course. So first, to the question on whether they knew what the convention was, we were surprised to see that knowledge is not very high. In fact, it's so first, the first question was whether they knew it very well, vaguely, or no. And in fact, a majority of people, only a minority said that they knew it very well or well. And then in addition, there was an open question on whether people could really explain what they knew. And so then we realized that even among people who said that they knew something, which means that they answered very well, or vaguely, in fact, the level of knowledge was very low. So in reality, if we take all this information together, the conclusion is that the level of knowledge is low. It's even less than what we saw in the first question. Yeah. So yeah. So then,
Thanks.
of course, this has a huge implication. Then asking people, do you think this is legitimate? Well, the point is they do not even really know what this is.
But nowadays they know more, and the question of legitimacy is more a political question. So if we ask now the same question, we will have very different answers depending on the political opinions of people.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with it. But at least during our surveys, that is to say in October, so the first one was in April, May 2020. So this was before the session during which they voted. And then the second wave was in October, November, which was after they voted. Then the level of knowledge was low. At this point in time, it was low. Of course, probably it's better now. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Then there is a question that maybe all of you could attempt to answer. And it is, are there any or were there any speech behavior guidelines to avoid that like more dominant people would dominate the discussions and the deliberation sessions, and like that guidelines that would also enable more silent actors to engage more actively in the discussions?
I can answer. Of course, there are facilitators, and their role is very important. They are trusted by the people, and they talk a lot. They are really the main figures, in fact. So the facilitators are very important. In France, the way it was done was that there was very few such guidelines. Okay, there was no rule of behavior that was stated very explicitly and things like that. It was very loose. But since we had the opportunity, and that's important, we had the opportunity to follow closely all these sessions, including the one in small rooms. So what we observed is that the main way by which these discussions are regulated is through time, when people begin to know each other. So after some times, they all knew each other, okay? And they knew that this person is shy, this person is very talkative, okay? This person is, and so on. And that's enough. And it works very well. So I think the answer is that with time you can rely on the people knowing each other as in real life.
Thank you. Does someone else want to add to that question? Otherwise, I would maybe pose a question to Lari.
I'll check the Finnish. There is there were rules, and actually they published the rules or the instructions for discussion. I'm just checking what they have here. They talk about respect for others and open without prejudices about other people's opinions and differing points of view, and encouraging people to think about the other people's point of view, understanding equally from different needs and views, and encouraging everyone to express themselves. And well, they say please understand and listen to other opinions, but it doesn't really say about, well, remember to give other people to say their have their word, don't interrupt others. So not really, but of course, as we heard, that it's facilitators' experience and professional work to really balance the participation with different types of people.
Thanks, Lari. Now I just lost the question I wanted to ask you. One moment. What is, Lari, the biggest challenge to get an assembly that would be able to influence climate policy in Finland on a legislative level?
Ooh, what a question. Actually, that would be interesting to ask from the UK and a French experience, because you already have those. So how you manage those? What I would say in the Finnish case is that we would really have to have the support from the policy level and also from the administrative level to do this. So have really opened the policy process. So now it's time we need the citizens' opinions, and this is the question now. This is the policy that we are working with, and now we need an answer for this, and also, so to say, as I hear from the French experience, that you have the left and the right parties are like criticizing it. So basically, we would need, I guess, support from the both sides in the Finnish case, so that it would be legitimate to counter this experience. So we would need support from the political side and also understanding from the politicians that the value of this process. And then we would need expertise from the administration side to know how and when to use these processes. Well, mentioning two, sorry, not one.
Yeah, thank you. Interesting to hear. Yeah, please, Jean-François.
Yeah. Yes, so I do not know about the Finnish case, but they are quite many previous cases and comparable citizen assemblies that took place in different countries, in particular in Canada, in several provinces, and in the lowlands, in Holland, and in other places. And I think it's there is very little chance to obtain support from the different parties. This occurred, if I understand, it occurred. The good example is the laws on abortion in Ireland that are nice examples where whole society could, through this citizen assembly, bypass some political deadlocks. But this is not what happens usually. What happens usually is just the contrary. For instance, the reforms on electoral laws in Canada that were initiated by some party, and that was cleverly ended by these citizen assemblies, and that was even voted by a majority of citizens at large in a referendum. At the end, they end up being involved in some political bargaining that finally kills the decision. And the example in Iceland about the constitutional process also is at the end, not at the beginning, but at the end is a sad story because it's impossible to get several to get all the parties to agree. So I think the point that where it can work is when there is one political opportunity for the party in power who has, for some reason, interest in doing this and that. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Yes, Lari, would you like to say comment on that?
Maybe one case could be that when the parties are really in deadlock, they don't have any other possibility than to call the citizen jury or citizen assembly. So they are so desperate that they really need to help and take an external point of view. That's sometimes used in mediation. But over to Nessy.
Yes, Nessy, would you like to add something to this question? At least I can't hear you.
No, I've unmuted.
Good.
I think it depends if you have a coalition, many countries have a coalition, you get the deadlock and you get cross-party deadlock. We have a huge majority Conservative Party. It's a very different situation. And you're absolutely right. Realistically, it needs to become government commissioned and government backed to really be, certainly in our situation in the UK, meaningful, for a citizens' assembly to be meaningful and to be for the recommendations to be enshrined in law. So obviously, apart from trying to influence government current policy, what we are trying to do at the moment, so our organisation is actually doing a grassroots campaign for a cross-party bill on the climate and ecological emergency. And within this bill, or precursor to a legislation, we have embedded a citizens' assembly. So we have two, a climate and nature objective, and then within that, we haven't made it prescriptive, but we said these objectives need to be met, and they can be met by the mechanism of a citizens' assembly working with expert bodies and Parliament together. And we have had lots of cross-party talks right across the political spectrum, but it's not easy. It's not easy.
Thank you, Nessy, for also presenting this perspective from the UK. I would like to know from you all now, what do you think is a citizens' assembly to tackle the climate crisis? Is it a revolutionary or more a reformative tool?
I think it's a reformative tool. You can vote.
Yeah, would you like to elaborate a bit?
I think it's a reformative tool because by construction, these randomly selected people, okay, are of different opinions, and then they have to make concessions one to the other. Okay, so they end up, and it's quite natural, taking middle of the road decisions. It's in a sense it's in the nature of these processes. Okay, so for good or bad, I think it's in the nature of the process. So and this is not how revolutions are done. That's what I think.
I totally agree. I think if it were revolutionary, the thing is we have so little time. The climate and ecological emergency is upon us now. We have the 6th mass extinction happening, and we are pushing really towards 1.5 degrees centigrade mean global temperatures. We don't have much time, but it can't be revolutionary because it would end up being maybe chaos. It's an unknown entity that way. So it has to be. That's why we decided to go through the governmental route in a reformative way. We're there. We have many local examples of assemblies and juries anyway, all around the world, actually. I mean, many, for example, in Latin America, for example, on a community level. So it's just a matter of really, it needs education though, because it's still not common parlance. People are not fully aware of this form of progressive democracy. So that there needs to be that, that belief in it and trust. But certainly the UK is ripe. It's in a I don't know about other countries, but it's certainly in that time where it's very divided. United Kingdom. We may even end up being, disunited from Scotland. Who knows? So we're at a real kind of crossroads where we definitely need something quite dramatically reformative rather than revolutionary, I would say.
If I may add something
to bring people together.
Mm-hmm. The case in France, what is very striking, and as maybe we have not told that in the presentation, is that on the first days, the presentation by scientists of the state of the global warming and things, this is described as a blow in the face by every actor, every citizen. So at that point, the thing was very strong. Some of these people who came from anywhere, they were crying in the rooms because of the emotional tension. It was a very strong experiment. Okay, so it's not a question that you have divergent interests. Okay. So that at the end you can only have a median decision. Okay, so they were strongly affected by the thing. So they were in a sense in a position to make the revolution for that. Okay, but what happens then after is something different, because they cannot act as activists. Okay. By definition, they have to represent everyone. Okay, they have to make concession and so on and so forth.
I could elaborate on this, because I think as a way of making decisions or as in social issues, so I think it's revolutionary. That really, we can't really solve the climate change or any complex problems with our democracy, which has been invented like 100 or 200 years ago. The world was totally different then. So we need to revolutionize the way we do decisions. And many organizations support self-organization and pushing the power on lowest level. And this actually, I see also in the climate initiatives, many entities, firms, and NGOs taking their own initiatives, because the governments and other bodies are so slow. So it can be in a way that we need to also take some time in the decision making. I know, maybe it's the African proverb that if you want to go fast, so you walk alone. But if you want to go far away, so you walk with people. And we need certainly to go far away, but we need the people with us. We can't go as a revolution fast. So we really are in a difficult situation, making a dilemma between the pace we need and the pace that we need to get those people on board. And I was just wondering about the need that usually it is so, as you said, that these processes come in a compromise, so you find the middle way. But with a good facilitation, it's also about the art of making possible things that are not yet possible. So it's not only finding a compromise somewhere between, but why finding something where the interests of people are met with a solution that can be behind something that is compromise. I'm not saying it's easy, but and it will be terribly difficult. And at the same time, I've seen it happen many times.
It does depend on your context, political context. And I think one of the things that I keep emphasizing with not just the bill, but this form of deliberative democracy is it can be, for the subject on the climate and ecology, it transcends all political parties. It doesn't matter if you're right, to the left, or to the center. It is an existential matter. That's it. It's just people express it in different ways. If you're to the right, you'll express it in different ways. You may say green and pleasant lands, conservation, being conservative. If you're more to the left, you'll talk about ecology and climate justice. But in the end, essentially, we're talking about a single essence of a thriving world for life and our future generations. And you're absolutely right. It's about also catching people's imagination to imagine what could be if we were to have this transformation, if you like.
Thank you. I think that was very nicely said by Nessy, that we have to go beyond our imagination, and I hope this talk contributes to that. Maybe as a last question, again to everyone, we could take the following one. What do you think? Could a citizens' assembly on a global level push equitable climate action?
Oh, that's a good question. Several facilitation gurus like Harrison Owen, who is the creator of Open Space, or Jim Ruff with the dynamic facilitation. So they have the idea that if only their method would be applied, so at least world peace would be achieved. So they have very strong belief in their facilitation method. But I don't know if you can say that any of these processes will produce equity or will produce certain results. But I think that as a process, so we need ways to engage people from all levels, like from the decision makers to the grassroots movements and everything in between, to find those solutions. So in this work, yes, we would need local and also European-wide and worldwide citizen assemblies and juries.
And just one to say, interesting, when the UK Climate Assembly was run and they looked at attitudes, do you remember I said that they made sure that there was quite a small bias of people who were indifferent, who weren't that concerned at all. And what they saw in the journey of education of those weeks, that their attitudes shifted towards the much greater concern than any others, and it was a really obvious shift. So it's really interesting that even though you may say, well, people may not get to the place we want them to get to, it's surprising that actual process of deliberation and that time of allowing people to speak, not lecturing at them. I think that is when it fails, when experts lecture at people and say, this is how you but giving that time to meet at some consensus, there was definitely a shift anyway, and that was very interesting, that psychological shift position.
And that's very empowering for people when they become as a part of the solution, not subjects of some policy decision making.
All I can say is sorry.
No, sorry. Go on.
Just to quickly say, ultimately, as I say before, none of this actually matters unless it's going to be legislated for, and that legislation is enforced. under judicial review. Otherwise, it will not change, will not happen at a systemic level.
Yes, for an assembly at a global level, I would wonder what could be the actual action of such an assembly. Local assembly can propose things and they can check whether it is applied after that. They have a feeling of acting visibly. And that is a question I had for Nessy. These principles that the UK Assembly agreed upon, what comes after that? What are the consequences of stating principles?
That's really interesting. I think what they did, they established the principles first to ensure that all those principles ran through the concrete recommendations. So if there were concrete recommendations on electric cars, the principles of fairness, societal fairness would mean, for example, they'd have to be added policies that would give grants to people who couldn't afford to change from a combustion engine to electric. So those kind of principles had to filter through every concrete recommendation.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. I think even though the discussion could still go on and there are also unanswered questions, still, I think we have to come to an end now. We from the working group, Citizens Assembly Working Group from Extinction Rebellion Finland, we would really like to thank you, Nessy, Lari, Bénédicte and Jean-François, for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. We appreciate it a lot, and we definitely learned a lot from your talks, and we also hope that the audience enjoyed this webinar.
Yes, thank you very much to all the participants, and thank you for the audience for the questions. And I'd like to remind, if you have questions or want to get involved, you can always be in contact with XR Finland. And we are glad we opened this space for discussion about the citizens' assemblies and the need for it in Finland. And we had really so many magnificent things coming up in this discussion. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Questions that remain unanswered. So if needed, you have our mails and you can forward the questions or whatever.
Yes, good. So please be in contact.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bon appétit.
Thank you. Bon appétit. Au revoir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are we still live, Pauli?